Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are. Hope you're having a great day so far. And if you've just woken up, you know, this is definitely the best thing to do first thing in the morning, to come and join in a global conference on Muslim family law reform. So my name is Rozana Isa. I am from an organization called Sisters in Islam. Zaina had definitely talked about it quite a bit yesterday, as she's one of the founding members. And so I will be your moderator for this session today. So I hope you, I'm going to be giving some housekeeping messages. So in the meantime, if you need to grab your coffee and so on, you know, please do so, because you're definitely going to have the best 1.5 hours of your life, at least for today. So first things first, we want you to know that this session is a public webinar, and it's available via Facebook live stream and recording that will be posted on the Musawah's YouTube channel. There will be questions and answers for Zoom participants through the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. And please use the chat function only for technical assistance and for sharing resources and material. And if you're tweeting or posting about this session, so please use the hashtags free our family laws and tag us at Musawah. Now, this webinar will be in English, and Arabic interpretation is available. So do have a look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and where it says interpretation, and you can switch to the Arabic audio channel, and don't forget to mute the original audio. So just a few other things. I think the organizers are going to keep everyone muted for the session. This video will be recorded, as mentioned earlier, it will be on YouTube later. And before I carry on, I just want to check in if everyone can hear me clearly, or should I put on the headphones now? Can someone give me the heads up if I'm clear, or you prefer me to put on the headphones? Very clear? Great. Thanks, Aisha, for getting back. Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. I'm just worried because at the same time, I'm charging my phone. All right. So I want to take you through the objectives of this session. So this particular webinar is definitely one of the learning sessions of the global conference. And the learning sessions essentially are, you know, to introduce participants to new knowledge, to new research, to scholarship, and to activism. So I hope you're excited about this. And what we will do in terms of format, we will be doing presentations, and then we will set a time after all the presentations for participants to raise their questions and answers. And then hopefully it'll be very interactive as well. Now, I would like to, you know, the particular session that we're doing today is on dismantling discriminatory frameworks from within. That sounds like a really big thing that we're doing, you know. We're basically shaking, you know, 1,400 years of tradition and bringing in our perspectives as women into interrogating this knowledge so that we will have the equality and justice that we demand for. Now, the objectives of this session, what we really want to do is to be able to introduce to you the diversity, flexibility, and dynamism of Muslim legal tradition on gender issues. Secondly, we want to debunk the patriarchal assumptions that have informed the discriminatory provisions in Muslim family laws. And finally, what we also want to do is to discuss and explore examples of juristic methods and mechanisms that can be used to support the reform that we want to bring in our time today. Okay, so, oh, okay, I have some time still. So I actually just want to share with you because as mentioned yesterday, you know, Sisters in Islam is basically one of the pioneering organization, you know, globally in the world. 33 years ago, you know, 8 women came together and decided, you know, they're going to read the Quran for themselves. They want to know for themselves what does the Quran provide in terms of women's rights. And at a time as well, you know, there's also a lot of hesitation about women engaging in religion, you know, and within the human rights framework, you know, there were mentions yesterday, and I'm sure they'll be discussed as well today, you know, the tensions between working within a religious framework and a human rights framework. But where Sisters in Islam is coming from, you know, what we want to do is to be able to decide, you know, we want to know for ourselves, we want to read for ourselves, and we want to decide how is it that we want to define Islam, you know, for ourselves, and not have, you know, like men and mullahs, you know, defining for us what Islam means for us. And so this is very, very critical when we want to talk about women's rights. You know, we have to know what is it that we want, our demands. I think 33 years ago, definitely in relation to, you know, talking about pushing for the domestic violence bill, for example. And Sisters in Islam and women's groups basically came across this barrier because Islamic religious authorities were saying, you know, no, you can have this law for non-Muslim women, but you can't have it for Muslim women because Islam says that husbands can beat their wives. I mean, that is completely outrageous if you were to repeat that today.
المسلمين ونحن سنحاول أن نتطرق إلى ذلك اليوم.
You know, because we have our own perspectives, our lived realities. It needs to be represented by women, by ourselves. So we are going to have, we are going to start. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to introduce you to our three amazing speakers for this panel. I've known some of them for quite a while, and they're just like, you know, I feel so blessed having them in my life, and I love them to bits, and I promise you, you're just going to be so enthralled with what they're presenting today. Right, so the first person that I'm going to be introducing to you, our first speaker, is Ziba Mir-Hosseini. I actually call her Commandant Ziba. Yes, she commands that kind of authority when she speaks, you know. So Ziba is a legal anthropologist specializing in Islamic law, gender, and development. She's a professional research associate at the Center for Middle Eastern and Islamic Law, University of London, and she has held numerous research fellowships and is a visiting professor at the Hauser Global Law School in New York University. She's one of the founding members of Musawah, and she is also a very prolific writer. She's written many, many books, and she is also a co-director of 2 award-winning feature-length documentary films on Iran, called, one is Divorce Iranian Style, and the other one is Runaway. So if you haven't watched it yet, you know, try and see if you can get it and watch it. And in 2015, she received the American Academy of Religion's Martin E. Award for the public understanding of religions. So we're going to be hearing from her soon. The second person that I would like to introduce to you is Zahia Jouirou, and she is the director of the Institute of Translation of Tunis and a professor of Islamic and Religious Comparative Studies in the University of Manouba. She specializes in family laws, fiqh, fatwa, and usul fiqh. She's, like Ziba, also a very prolific writer and has published many, many books and articles. And Zahia is also a member, an active member of the Tunisian network of women's groups. She was engaged in the campaign to safeguard women's rights in the Tunisian constitution after the revolution. Like Ziba, she's also a recipient of many awards and distinctions. And she was awarded with the CREDIF prize. I would not attempt to even try to pronounce it in French, but I'm sure this is a very distinguished prize for her writings on women's issues. And this year, earlier in February, she received an award from the Tunisian Minister of Women, Family and Childhood in recognition for her precious contributions to improving women's status and rights in Tunisia. And finally, we also have the amazing Sarah Marsso, who will be presenting as well today. Sarah is a graduate of Sciences Po in European Studies and International Relations. She holds an MA in Development Cooperation in the Middle East and North Africa from the Institute of Political Studies in Lyon. I translated that in English. I dare not attempt to do it in French. Since 2015, she has been coordinating the activities of Musawah's knowledge building working group. She's written many, contributed to many of the Musawah publications, and she had also co-authored two of Musawah's very important books, one called Women's Stories, Women's Lives, The Male Authority in Muslim Context, and another one on Who Provides and Who Cares, The Changing Dynamics in Muslim Families. And Sarah is based in Paris. She's been involved in various workshops, activities, and events relating to feminist and anti-racist activism in France and Europe. Okay, great. On the dot, 3:10. Now, we're going to start our panel. So I'm going to invite our dear Ziba first to speak. And so these are my questions. I mean, to kind of like frame what is it that we're going to be talking about here, because the title of this webinar is really, really huge. We're talking about dismantling discriminatory frameworks from within. And we live in context, in which discrimination against women seems deeply embedded in every structures of the society. And so, Ziba, can we really aim at dismantling these centuries-old discriminatory frameworks? Can there be an equal construction of gender rights from within the Muslim tradition? The floor is yours. You have 15 minutes.
Thank you, Rozana, and thank you for that kind and generous introduction. The short answer is yes, of course. And exactly because there is a theoretical concord between the egalitarian spirit of Islam and also our aim for gender equality from within Islamic legal tradition. But I think the hard question and the longer question is that how can we bring this about? Through what processes? And this is what I want to talk about. And I want to frame it with particular reference to the feminist voices and scholarship in Islam and their potential and their promise for paving the way to achieve this. But let me just give you my argument and then flesh it out as much as possible. The struggle for gender equality everywhere is a struggle for social, political, and economic justice. And it is part of a larger struggle. And in Muslim context, for us, this struggle is very much embedded in relations between politics and theology. In a sense that for us, this struggle is at once theological and political. So it is sometimes hard to separate them. And that is why it is I see the potential of the new feminist voices. And these new feminist voices emerged in the last 2 decades of the 20th century. And Musawah Sisters in Islam are part of this feminist voices and feminist scholarship. And to me, they have they are doing 3 things. And these 3 things are important. One is recovering and reclaiming the ethical and egalitarian ethos in Islam's sacred texts. And this is essential. Secondly is producing new critical egalitarian knowledge and methodology from within Muslim contexts. So both knowledge and the methodology are important for us. And in the sense, what they are doing, they are democratizing the process of the production of religious knowledge. And this process of democratization of production of knowledge, whether it is religious or non-religious, is absolutely important because of the ways that the knowledge and power are intertwined. And finally, and this is what I'm going to focus on, they are opening a constructive conversation and a meaningful conversation between human rights and feminism and Muslim legal tradition. And it is this conversation that is really changing the scene for us. Now, I want to, there are so many definitions of feminism, and we all know what feminism is about. It is a consciousness and it is a movement. But there is another side to feminism that is often neglected, and that is the knowledge side. That feminism is actually a knowledge project. It gives us the tool, the critical tools to deal with the unreflective assumptions, with what has become the common sense, like men have authority over the woman, both accepted in religious tradition and in our culture, and also in the society as well. And also it provides us with a framework and a methodology and a strategy for including women's voices that have been silenced. There are many definitions of feminism, but the one that I really like and I want to share with you is by Rosemary Radford Reuter. And she's a founding member of a feminist theology movement. And I think for us, it is important to look at this definition. And because what she says is that feminism basically means the affirmation of the full humanity of women. And that is what we want. And that is what is there in the Quran. This means that all the ways women have been defined as inferior, secondary, and dependent on men since the rise of patriarchy are rejected. It means that women are affirmed as fully human, not partly human and complementary to the male, but with all the human attributes and capacities in relation to both autonomy and mutuality with other humans, male and female, as well as with ecosystem. To me, this somehow encapsulates the struggle and the demand of Muslim women. And to me, what is equality? Now, I want to go to turn to what is this egalitarian construction in Islam that we are talking about, and how we are aiming to achieve this. Here I want to make 2 points. The first point is that gender equality is a new ideal, which only recently in the course of 20th century has become inherent to the conceptions of justice. And until before that, it was possible to gender equality was not so much part of our understanding and conceptions of justice, but it is now. And therefore, it is natural that in Islam and in other, as in other religious traditions, the idea of gender equality between men and women is neither relevant to, was neither relevant to the notion of justice, or has been part of the juristic landscape. In other words, what I want to say that in pre-modern interpretation of Shari'ah, justice for women is there, but not in the sense of equality. And that is an element. And therefore, the whole, the pre-modern jurists did not have to deal with the issue of gender equality, but now they have to deal with it. And also another thing that we must not forget is that as a dominant form of social order, patriarchy emerged long before Muslim Islam. So therefore, it became, when Islam emerged as a religion, patriarchy was there and it endured in the Islamic civilization and endured and is reflected in understanding of Islam's sacred texts. And the final point that I want to make in relation to Islamic legal tradition is that there is a tension. There is a tension in Islam's sacred texts between the egalitarian, ethical egalitarianism as an essential part of Islam, and also between the patriarchal context in which the message was unfolded. And this tension enables both those who argue for gender equality, rely on sacred texts, and those who contest gender equality and argue for equity or patriarchy or complementary. And at the moment, but this tension, as well as the fact that any legal tradition is human construction, and it is a construction and is a social construction and came in time through the history, has created a great deal of diversity in perspectives, in gender perspectives. At the moment, we can see in Muslim context 3 competing perspectives and ideologies that exist side by side. And each of them are supported by a set of theological, kalami arguments, juristic, fiqhi arguments, and they are based on social, sexual assumptions and theories about the nature of human being and the nature of men and women. At the moment, we have these three perspectives, as I said, exist side by side. One of them, I call them traditional. And that is the perspective that is in classical fiqh. And in this perspective, this is premised on a very strong egalitarian ethos. And this perspective is now in a very small minority. And in this perspective, women, biology is destiny. If you're born a woman, your destiny is decided. And you have equality in the eyes of God, but not in the eyes of men. And the second, this is in a small minority, as I say. The second perspective and the third perspective emerged in the course of 20th century. And the first one emerged in the context of codification of family law in Muslim context, and also the emergence of the nation states and the end of the colonial era. And I call this perspective neo-traditionalist because it doesn't, or neo-fiqh, because it doesn't admit equality fully, but at the same time, it doesn't, it reproduces the fiqh concept of gender, but in a very moderate and modified form. But it keeps the essence of inequality. I would say that its perspective is the majority, in the majority of Muslim context, whether the law is codified or not codified, we find this perspective. We find this perspective in the mass of literature that now we have under the women's right in Islam, which are totally a new literature and until recently were written by men. And it is reflected in legal codes. And I think our challenge is really with this perspective. But there is a third perspective that emerged towards the end of the 20th century and early 21st century. I call this perspective reformist or feminist. And this perspective argues for equality on all grounds. And also this perspective now is a minority. It is still in formation, and it is advocated by feminist voices in Islam and Musawah and Sisters in Islam, and it is partially reflected, I would say, in the legal system of Tunisia and Morocco. So just to stress that this is this diversity that we see, and these three perspectives exist side by side and they compete with each other. Now I want to turned my attention to another part. And that part is that how this perspective came into existence. And as I said, this perspective came to existence towards the end of 20th century. And I see three turning points in this perspective. And first of all, this emergence is very much embedded and related to the rise of political Islam. Because this, and I would say that the rise of feminist voices is also a response to that, to the political Islam. Because what the political Islam did, in the name of bringing Sharia back, brought the pre-modern interpretations of Islam's legal text. And in fact, brought the classical fiqh out into the open. And this had some advantages. It had an advantage in the sense that it actually opened these classical rulings and their logic open to scrutiny. And this happened towards the end of 20th century, women educated, women out in the public space. So they went back. They went back to Quranic texts. They went back to the jurisprudence and started challenging this. And another thing that is important is that we see in 1979, the rise of the Iranian Revolution, which I would see as an acme of political Islam. It is then that we have Zina laws in Pakistan. It is then that after that we have in Sudan the changes, and it is where political Islam gains power and becomes from opposition, comes into position in some Muslim countries. And what happens in 1979 is also adoption of CEDAW, the Convention Against All Forms of Discrimination against Women, by the United States. By the UN, by the General Assembly of the UN. And what it does is to give women actually a framework for arguing for equality. And in 1980s, we see the emergence of women's group, we see the emergence of NGOs, and we see a new kind of activism. And I would say that in 1980s and 1990s, we have this clash, the clash between two frames of reference. The one introduced by political Islam and the one introduced by human rights and feminism. And the clash of these two gave rise to the feminist voices in Islam. And now it is still continuing. And I want to say that it is a process that is still going on. And Musawah is actually embedded in this, is a result of this process. You know, when Musawah came into existence, it was after 2001. It was when we as Muslim women really saw ourselves in a crossfire between political Islam on the one side and also between neo-colonial and policies that were introduced in the aftermath of war of terror. And in Musawah, we build on the work of other women's group. We build on the centuries of women's activism and also on the Islamic new trends of Islamic thought to create a framework. And I want briefly to say what we do in what is this framework and why it is so important. We adopt in Musawah in a critical feminist approach, but simultaneously we work within Muslim legal tradition. We insist on two main distinctions in that in a tradition, which underlie the emergence of schools of Islamic law, mazahib, and the plurality and the diversity within Islamic legal tradition. That is, there's a distinction between Shari'ah and fiqh. Shari'ah is the law that Muslims believe it's a part, in fact. In fact, in the Quran, it doesn't appear as a law, as a part, as an ethical framework. That Muslims believe that it is sacred and it is the will of God for humanity. And fiqh is, which literally means understanding, is the process of understanding what are the terms of this part. So it is a jurisprudence and it is human. And then in its legal tradition, we have two sets of Islamic legal tradition. In fact, we have two sets of ruling, ma'amalat and ibadat. And this also enables us to challenge, because ibadat are regulating the relationship with God, and there is little room for rationalization. But the ma'amalat that deals with social contracts, with social relations and family law and gender issues, and in fact, every law is part of this, is open to rationalization. And these distinctions, and also using and learning from the feminist methodology, gave us the language and tools to challenge patriarchy from within and ask questions like, how far the classical notions of gender reflect the principle of justice that is inherent in Islam? Why and how classical fiqh defined marriage and gender relations in a way that subject women to authority? And what are the critical and ethical foundations for male authority in Islam? And that was really the first research project that Musawah did. And that has to do with understanding the two concepts of qawama and wilaya, that gives men authority over women. And the answers that we found, and the answers that feminist scholarship in Islam gives us, is actually, it came about through there are two sets of reasons for that. The first set of reasons is ideological, political, because of the strong patriarchal ethos that informed reading of sacred texts. And it was with that ethos that the early Muslims read the sacred text, but that is after the death of the Prophet. Second set of political reason was that women were excluded from the process of production of knowledge and political life. By the time that the fiqh schools emerged, women's voices were silent. Women are really playing an important role, both at the time of the Prophet and until the emergence of fiqh schools, in transmitting the knowledge. In hadith, the hadith literature, you know, one of the main transmitters of hadith is Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. But by the time that the fiqh schools is emerged, their voices are silenced, so their interests are no longer reflected in law. And the second set of reasons for patriarchal in construction of gender in Islamic is, I call it, it is epistemological. It is how this law was approached. Classical jurists sanctified pre-Islamic norms, marriage practices, and gender ideologies existed, and they treated them as divinely ordained. Thus, they saw them as permanent and immutable. And they did this through a set of philosophical, metaphysical, social, and political theories and assumptions. I just mentioned some of them. One of them, which is not in the Quran, but it is there in the Hadith, and it is actually at the root of why men have authority over women, is that women are created for men of. Women are created for men and of men. And this is not actually supported by the sacred text. Secondly, God gave men authority over women. Women are defective in faith. Women are defective in reason. and women are defective in wealth and property. So these are, and most importantly, that women's sexuality is the source of disorder. It is a danger to society. It is fitna, therefore women should be secluded and put aside from society. So these are a set of assumptions. I'm just concluding.
Yes, please, Ziba, thank you.
Yeah, the set of assumptions that is there. And this set of assumptions
لا ما خلصتش أنا لسه بشتغل أهو.
This set of assumptions we need to challenge them, and we are challenging them. And it is only then that, you know, we really, by challenging these sets of assumptions and producing new knowledge and recovering ethical voices in Islam, recovering the ethical and egalitarian ethos of Islam's sacred text, that we can do that. And in doing so, you know, we are slowly but surely are paving the way for dismantling centuries-old discriminatory framework. And this discriminatory framework have not only informed our religious tradition, but our cultural tradition and also our legal system. So it is a social construction, came in time, and in time it can go, but the process has started. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ziba. You've definitely given us food for thought. And I want to say that actually you've also, you know, what you presented in terms of, you know, raising this question had definitely given, you know, there was a Q&A earlier on, somebody who said that, you know, all these ideas are entirely new, and he, I'm assuming it's he from the name, that he cannot accept it, and he's saying that he has to leave the session. So that's interesting in terms of, you know, what we're talking about here is really about, you know, the very core of the word, you know, dismantling the discriminatory framework, and already that has, you know, there are vibes, strong vibes that people are already reacting to it. So I also want to bring in, you know, what Ziba had said about, you know, we're talking about Muslim family law reform, but why is it that we have to also, you know, talk about, you know, politics? And obviously, you know, where all these issues are, you know, these issues are related to the issue of power. And I want to recall, you know, what Hala in the session yesterday, she said that, you know, when we're talking about Muslim family law, when we're talking about women's rights, you know, she said that we mustn't shy away from talking about and raising questions on politics. So I think that's food for thought in terms of what Ziba had just presented. And I would like to now, thank you so much, Ziba, for that very, very informative, knowledgeable, and groundbreaking, earth-shattering session, you know. I would like to now invite Zahia. Now, Zahia, are you on? Let me see. Okay, great. So women's rights activists are advocating for reform in Muslim contexts, and they're often accused of betraying Islam. They're falling into the traps of Western agendas. But, you know, what Ziba has shared with us, you know, Islamic teachings has always been flexible, that, you know, it can be changed. We are open to change. Now, can you please take us briefly through how Muslim scholars have developed a rich, flexible, and dynamic set of concepts and methodologies to interpret the sacred text? And how can this be meaningful to our contemporary context? And you have 15 minutes, Zahia. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Rozana. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I will first of all give a historical overview about Islamic laws. Then I will speak about the family laws reform through the Tunisian example, and especially through the example of reform of inheritance laws. For the historical overview, we can speak about many periods the history of Islamic law, the formative period. It's characterized by the interrelations between the Shari'ah and the custom laws, what is said, the Arf, and that's why we find many of the pre-Islamic Arab customs in the what is known or Islamic law. In the second period, the Islamic law or Sharia is institutionalized by the school of law. We find that it's the period where the school of laws emerged, like Malikiya or Hanbaliya or Shafi'iyya. Then it is also the period where the science of methodology, known as Usul Fiqh, was determined by Shafi'i. The main thing about the source of law is that we can speak about two kinds. The first kind is the main resources, what are the Quran, but the main problem for the Quran that is about the verses of Ahkam are very, we have only 500 verses of Ahkam. That's why what is said in the Quran, it's about ethics more than about rules, about laws. The second source is the Sunnah, but with the Sunnah also we have many problems, the problems of narration, the problems of sanad. The third resource is the consensus, what is said, the consensus of the Ummah, but we can say that in the history we only know what is in the fact. We have only the consensus of the scholars inside the school of fiqh. The consensus, for example, the consensus of Maliki fuqaha or of Hanbali, but it's only theoretical that we speak about the consensus of the Ummah. For the qiyas, it was the most tool used by the fuqaha. It's the legal resonance. It is a method of analogy used to drive rulings of matters that don't have an explicit hukum in the nas. Also, when we look to the history of Muslim Shari'ah or Muslim laws, we distinguish two moments. The first one is the moment of ijtihad and the moment of taqlid. During the moment of ijtihad, the Islamic laws, the Islamic legal system had been able to find his own solution to the emerging legal cases and to the changing circumstances, and a large selection of tools and concepts and methods had been elaborated by many eminent scholars. But during the moment of taqlid, we find that every generation had to take the same rules put by the scholars of the generation of the last generation. Then we find the reopening of ijtihad at the 14th and 20th century, and during this moment we find the statutory legislation. From the pre-modern period, a real problem had emerged: how to adapt the Shari and the Shari rules to the process of change in the Muslim countries. We know that during the modern period, many social changes are a challenge for any legal system based on a fine text. The text, the Quran is a fine text, the Sunnah is also a fine text, but the social changes are, that's why the social changes are a challenge for this legal system. And the main issue jurisprudents have to come to terms with is how the limited material foundation of the law can be here on everyday life in an ever-changing environment. We will give a new perspective on the role of Islamic law in relation to modern developments. To come over this problem, we find that many jurists in the modern moment used to speak about maqasid al-Shari'ah, about how can we use maqasid al-Shari'ah to give solution to the new problems. They speak about a new ijtihad using many tools from the classical methodology of fiqh, like istihsan, like istishab, like maslaha. But the main tool used in this modern period is maqasid al-Shari'ah. It is used as a methodology for the renewal of the theory of the Islamic law, the development of a new maqasid by coining a new and contemporary terminology that were never formulated in traditional usul fiqh. For example, the theory of the preservation of lineage. We know that in maqasid we speak about 5 daruriyat, 5 daruriyat: حفظ النفس، حفظ الدين، حفظ العرض، حفظ المال، وحفظ العقل. When we take, for example, the preservation of lineage, حفظ النسل, it is used, for example, the theory of the preservation of the family system. The protection of true belief, حفظ الدين, it is used into freedom of beliefs. Many new concepts were introduced, like orderliness, like natural disposition, like freedom, like rights, civility, and equality, as maqasid in their own right, and upon which the whole Islamic law is based. Then we find that many modern concepts were introduced into the Islamic law through the maqasid, and especially the concept of equality. The concept of equality was introduced as one of the God's will that we have to take in our laws. The jurists speak also about a new ijtihad, but the new ijtihad is using especially many tools, many modern tools, the tools of interpretation, new interpretations of the Quran, the tools of using new methodologies, the methodologies used in the law studies, like anthropology, like sociology. That's why the Islamic law has known many transformation in the modern period. For example, we pass from jurists law to statutory law, and we pass from an interpretative law to legislative law. This transformation was the fruit of the modern period and of the work of many eminent jurists who wanted to find to give a new perspective on the role of Islamic law in relation to modern developments of Islam in society, and to explore how can we resort to interpretation in order to apply the material sources of the law to the actual legal cases that need to be ruled open. We have also in the Islamic law many concepts that have been used to demonstrate the religious nature of the law, but we can reinterpret them and we can review them to show that the Islamic law is not is in his majority human and historical, and the minority of these rules are from the sacred text. Well, I think that Ziba before me has spoken about Shari'ah and fiqh, and the differences between Shari'ah and fiqh show us that there's a great difference between what is from the Quran, the rules that are from the Quran, and the rules that are from human and historical resources. The majority of the Islamic law are from qiyas, or from istihsan, or from istishab, or from also from the sunnah. And these resources let us know that the majority of the Islamic law is human and historical. That's why we have to know the differences between Sharia, what is from the sacred text, and which is very limited, and what is from the historical and the human resources. That's an idea about the historical, the history of the Islamic law. When we come to the modern period, and since the beginnings of the 20th century, the Muslim world has been engaged in a series of legal and political reforms, having for a goal the consolidation of women's rights. This commitment is the result of the combination of three factors. The first one is the national movement of general and especially religious reform, a political will, and a fears of feminist and civil society activism. That's why we speak about the relation, the interrelation between the family laws reforms, but also with what is political. We have to reform the political system, and also the social system, because we have to know that we can't change laws without having a political will or a political system that is for he's going for these reforms. These reforms have benefited women. The most important are the new codes of the family and personal states that underwent important gender equalizing changes over the last generation. For example, the personal states code in Tunisia had given the women many important rights that go in another of gender equalizing change, and they were also able, the women were also able to benefit from a policy promoting the women rights. For example, in Tunisia, the last struggle, the last feminist and civil society struggle for gender equality is the struggle for equality in inheritance laws. This struggle we find three actors in this struggle: the feminist organization, and the feminist organization have put many research to show that for arguments to argue for equality, many studies, many research. For example, a project that have been during 5 years, and that give a study of 2 volumes, what is about equality in inheritance law, given by AFTUR. It's a feminist organization of many academic women, and these research give many arguments: the social arguments, the economical, the political, the religious arguments to argue for equality in inheritance. From these arguments, we find, for example, from these arguments to argue for equality in inheritance law, we find that many social and economic and political, but I will only speak about the Shari'ah arguments because of it's very long. The Shari'ah arguments for equality, the first one is about the real history of transmission of property in Islam. We find that the transmission of property by succession is the product of history. It was not based on filiation, but rather on the defense of the tribe and its honor. The goods were reserved for the warriors and not for the descendants. With the advent of Islam, the Quranic provisions constituted a radical reform of customary law in favor of women in matters of succession. A new legal conception was established by assigning specific fractions of the patrimony to individual members of the family, by allowing 6 categories of women out of the 9 designated rights holders, and the differences between they used also the differences between the fiqh schools in matter of inheritance law as a tool to show that there never been a consensus about these laws. There's many differences between the fiqh schools, demonstrate that inheritance laws are historically and human in their majority. The example of the legal schools of Sunni Islam in inheritance matters attests to this. For example, only one example, we find that in the absence of an ignite parent, the Malikites make the public treasure the legatee, while for other schools the treasure only inherits if it is the property it isn't claimed. It is if only if the property is unclaimed. Parents such as the children of the deceased's daughter or sister are heirs according to Hanafit Shafi'ite and Hanbalite law in the absence of ignite hairs, but are not in Maliki law.
Zahia, can you wrap it up, please? We're out of time.
Okay.
Can you wrap up, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
We can say that the possibility of changing Islamic law in order to be more equal towards women is possible, but there's many. We have to put together the feminist organization, the civil society organization also, but also we need to have political support. The political support from parliament, from the president. It was determining the Tunisian women struggle for equality in inheritance law. As conclusion, we can say that we can find in the classical Islamic jurisprudence many tools to use, but also we have to work together. All the as I say, the feminist organization, the social society, the civil society, and the political side is also very interesting to go after this gender equality.
Fantastic, Zahia. Thank you so much. Again, I mean, I think the themes about, definitely we can find reform from within the Islamic legal traditions. The arguments are there, the tools are there. Definitely, our role as women activists, is very critical in pushing for change. And again, that message from Hala about not being shy in terms of, having to deal with the political structures, because that's where the power is in terms of that we need to deal with in terms of bringing these reforms to fruition. So thank you very much, Zahia. Wonderful session, very, very rich. And now I would like to invite Sarah Marsso, our third presenter for the session. So Sarah is actually, okay, Ziba has given us a lot of input in terms of, the locations from where the power is. And then, Zahia has gone into giving us, the Muslim legal traditions and how it is that we can actually bring in reform from there. So where do we go from here? And so I would like to ask, how is all of this meaningful to our daily struggles for equality and justice in Muslim contexts? The floor is yours, Sarah.
Thank you, Rozana. And thank you, Ziba and Zahia, for your enlightening intervention. It's really an honor for me to be part of this panel with three women who have been my teachers and inspiration. So, Rozana, where do we go from here? Why is this session important for our campaign for justice? Because this webinar is part of this global conference. And so what does this have to do with reforming laws and policies? So we know that knowledge is power, and that through knowledge, we can break the hegemony of the patriarchal religious discourse, but also of its supporters. But what kind of knowledge? Because some of you might think we don't need religious knowledge. We want to get rid of it. Why dismantling patriarchy from within when you could just do without it? But can we? Because many feminist activists have tried to reform discriminatory practices using exclusively secular and often Western principles and instruments. But let's face it, this alone didn't work. Even when eventually law reform efforts toward gender equality succeeded, the implementation of these laws, the practice on the ground didn't change. Because in our context, religion remains the elephant in the room. The religious legitimation of patriarchy and the patriarchal use of religion is so strong that one cannot simply ignore it. And what sisters in Islam have done, and then Musawah, is to remove the fear factor from dealing with religion. Khalas, it's no longer a no-go zone. We are not ceding our faith and religious spaces to patriarchal forces. So in fact, what we say is that the elephant in the room is not Islam or any other religion. The elephant is the patriarchy dressed in a religious cloth. So instead of looking at religion as a barrier to women's rights, we are looking at it as an incentive and a ground that we can and have the entire legitimacy to claim. But what do we mean by religion? And that's why Ziba and Zahia's presentations were essential, because whose Islam are we talking about? Yes, patriarchal interpretations of Islam exist and are dominant and are used to inspire our laws and policies that discriminate against us. But we cannot reduce Islam to this. They flag religion as a problem. What we say is that it can be part of the solution. But how? Before sharing brief concrete examples of how religious arguments were used to advocate for family reform, I would like to briefly explore with you how is the religious knowledge produced, by whom, who has authority, and how it influences our policymakers. So what you are now seeing in the slide, the next slide please, is the religious knowledge factory. So we've developed this using a model created by the Data Center Research for Justice, and it's a useful tool to understand the power dynamics in the factory in which knowledge is designed and packaged to impact policymaking. So at the top of the infographic, you will find the knowledge producers. On the right side, we have the mainstream religious knowledge producers. And on the left, we have grassroots knowledge, people's knowledge. At the bottom, we have the consumers of this knowledge. In the right bottom, we have the policymakers, so those who enact the laws and the regulations based on the knowledge they receive from the mainstream producers. And in the bottom left, we have the society, us, who are impacted by the policies and laws. So we can clearly see that there are power dynamics at play and a disconnect between the left and the right side of this factory. On the right, we have those who have the power to influence the discourses, the norms, and the laws. And in the left side, we have us, people on the ground, whose experiences are dismissed and who are directly impacted by these norms and laws. But who are the religious mainstream producers? Because there are no doubts that they are dominantly men when we talk about Muslim context, sometimes even men from the past, men from the 12th and 13th century. But we also have powerful religious institutions like the universities, like the Azhar University, the Zaytuna University, many other religious official establishments. But we also have mainstream religious media and channels. So all these producers are said to be mainstream because their knowledge is official. It's deemed to be true, valid. They're supposed to convey the right picture and interpretation of the Shari'ah. Why does this all matter to us? Because the opinion of these mainstream producers, their opinions, their interpretations, their fatwa, are not only impacting the daily lives of the believers. In Muslim majority countries, they are also taken into consideration by our decision makers in the parliaments, in our governments, in our courts. So their interpretation of Islam, their interpretation of what is acceptable and what is not, is seen as legitimate regardless of whether it reflects the lived realities on the ground or not. And I'm sure you have many examples in mind in each of your contexts, in Egypt, Lebanon, Morocco, Sudan, even in Tunisia, and Zahia has shown that in her presentation. Whenever there is a family law matter that is discussed in parliament, a CEDAW report that is reviewed, religion is brought in the discussion, whether you like it or not, you have to deal with it. But what's happening in the left side of this factory? Because women are also knowledge consumers, but they are also producers, because their lived realities, their experience is a wealth of knowledge through which they read and interpret Islamic teachings differently. Because the Quran doesn't speak only to men, it speaks to all of us. But this knowledge produced by Muslim women is considered as non-conventional, something that is not legitimate enough. So there is a disconnect between the left and the right side of this factory. The voices and experiences of those in the left, our lived realities, our experiences, are disregarded and silenced by mainstream knowledge producers and hence not taken into account by the decision makers. So how can we bridge this disconnect? By claiming two rights: our right to know. So to know what? To know what's going on there on the bottom right of this factory. How is Islamic knowledge produced? What kind of interpretations? Which concepts? And this is what Dr. Zahia presented to us today. But also a right to be heard. And this is the right to invest these religious spaces and these religious discourses. Because as believers, but also as citizens, our experiences matter. and we have the right to contributing in producing the knowledge and the data that informs our norms and laws. And this is where women's activism, your activism, is essential in claiming these two rights, to know and to be heard in this factory where knowledge is produced. So what this factory tells us is, yes, it's possible, and yes, it's necessary to dismantle discriminatory frameworks from within. But where does that take us to in our strategy for reform? Because Muslim family law reform is not just about drafting a law in the parliament. It's really a transformative agenda. Building on strong feminist movements is essential, but unfortunately, it's not enough for successful family law reform. It requires other things, a constellation of political forces in the parliament, in the religious spaces. It's also connected to democratic processes, but it needs also to be grounded in the lived realities with activists and communities on the ground. You cannot carry out a reform project without starting from the ground. So in short, for successful Muslim family law reform, we need to work within a plurality of frameworks. So we need to think about how can we bring these multiple frameworks in harmony to achieve our common objective, which is equality in the family. So that's why Musawah developed a holistic framework that combines Islamic teachings with universal human rights principles, state constitutions and laws, and the lived realities of Muslim families. And we ground our claim to equality and arguments for reform simultaneously at these four levels. Musawah's framework for action echoes a concept developed by Werner Minsky, the law as a flying kite, in which he argues that law as it functions and is experienced in the lived reality is in fact plural. It consists of multiple entities. It's not uniform. So Musawah's holistic framework is itself this flying kite because we have these four main entities. And within these four main entities, the way actors understand and use them is dynamic and fluid, but there are also tensions and interactions. So let's take, for example, Islamic teachings. Islamic teachings are plural, and this is something that Ziba talked about too, is Islamic teachings include egalitarian, but also patriarchal ethics, which are dominant, but also in tension and in interaction with this egalitarian ethics. So there is a conversations going on there in this entity called Islamic teachings, and we are part of this conversation. The lived realities are also plural. Muslim women are not all the same, and we don't have the same experiences between Malaysia, Iran, Tunisia, Morocco. Even within Malaysia, Malaysian Muslim women have different experiences, different class background and challenges. So even the lived realities among Muslim women is plural, and there are tensions and negotiations. And the same can be said with human rights, with state laws. We can have a constitution that says all its citizens are equal before the law. And then in the same state, have a personal status law that says women can't pass on their nationality rights to their children. So there are also tensions within our state laws. So what we are doing in this project for law reform is constantly negotiating the meanings of these four entities with one common goal. What do we want to achieve? We want to dismantle discriminatory, patriarchal laws, norms, and policies. So we find this model useful because it allows us to think holistically about reform. We have one goal, but multiple frameworks, multiple strategies to work with. Now, very briefly, how does this look like in practice? And I would like to share with you two examples, one from Morocco and one from Indonesia. So Musawah's framework for action was very much inspired by the Guide to Equality in the Family, which was produced in 2003 by the Collectif 95 Maghreb Égalité, a regional network of women's groups from Morocco, Tunisia, and Algeria. And this guide provided a model for a holistic four-pronged approach to family law reform. It proposed 100 measures and provisions for an egalitarian codification of the personal status codes and family law in the Maghreb. For each measure, what you find is first, legal arguments based on national laws in the three countries. Secondly, religious arguments based on the historical diversity of Islamic legal doctrines. Thirdly, human rights arguments stemming from international human rights mechanisms, and also sociological arguments related to the lived realities of changing context in the Maghreb countries. So let's take one example from the guide, child marriage. Next slide, please. So the collective demand is very clear. The minimum age for marriage shall be set at 18 years for both women and men, which is the age of legal majority. So this is the common goal. We want to have 18 years as the minimum age for marriage for both men and women. But how do we reach this goal? So when you look at the guide, the collective will provide arguments from the 4 approaches. First, it goes with the legal arguments. They provided an overview of the laws in the 3 countries. What is the legal age for marriage? What is the legal age for majority? And what's the criminal majority age? So they compare between these 3 different legal ages, and they highlight the differences and the contradictions, the fact that you have a legal majority age at 19 and then you have a minimum age of marriage at 15. And they also highlight the differences between these laws, within these laws between men and women. Secondly, they look at the religious arguments. They give an overview of the different fiqh opinions on the minimum age of marriage. And what they highlight there is also the diversity of opinion, the fact that the fuqaha didn't all agree on one age. There isn't only one uniform Islamic recommendation for this. And this is also something that bears potential. It's also followed by another very strong religious argument, the fact that the Quran didn't explicitly address the issue of legal age of marriage for young girls. It's all a matter of interpretation. What is the age of puberty, bulugh, and what is the age of maturity, of rushd? So they mention the verse 6 from Surah An-Nisa that says, if you find them capable of sound judgment. So based on this verse and the other religious arguments, the collective conclude that the age at which a person is capable of sound judgment is the legal age of majority. And this is 18 in most of the countries, but even later for other countries. So we don't have time to go in depth into the other arguments outlined by the guide, but you will also find sociological data on the harmful effects of child marriage in the 3 countries, such as the higher rates of domestic violence, premature birth, difficult labor, as well as how the changing forms of families in Morocco, Algeria, and Morocco left this move from these extended families that had a lot of support to young couples isolated in precarious conditions. And finally, you find also human rights arguments, because all these 3 countries ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this guide is accessible online, and my colleague will put references on the chat. So I encourage you to have a look, just because even if it's dated from 2003, it is still very relevant. And this guide is one of the key components that led to the successful reform of the Moroccan family code, the Mudawana, in 2004. And you can see in the slide here, the Article 3 from the preamble of the Mudawana, which set the minimum age for marriage at 18 for both women and men, with exceptions in justified cases. Now I will briefly go over the second example, which is from our Indonesian friends. So in 2017, 3 major Indonesian organizations working on issues related to gender justice, Alimat, Fahmina, Rahima, and Aman Indonesia, organized the first Congress of Women Religious Scholars. So this Congress is known as KUPI, and yesterday Zaina Anwar had mentioned that very briefly in the webinar. So the aim of this Congress was to reclaim the right for women religious scholars to issue fatwas, to issue religious opinions. And in Indonesia, there are 3 official authorities producing fatwa. But like in many other Muslim countries, these 3 authorities are dominated by men. They don't include any woman. And so these men have been producing religious opinions on all matters, including matters concerning only women, like FGM, like marital rape. And of course, they didn't include any woman in the process. So it's not surprising that this fatwa, these opinions, are always disconnected from women's lived realities. So with the launch of KUPI, the Indonesian women scholars said, enough. Enough of being silenced. Enough of trying to convince you to include women's experiences. We will do it ourselves. So they produced 3 fatwas. One against child marriage, one against domestic violence, and one against environmental destruction. And this was a huge development for Muslim women's rights in Indonesia, but also in the world, for several reasons. Why? One is that it was the first time that female religious scholars produced fatwa based on their lived realities on these issues. Secondly, they used Musawah's holistic framework to build the arguments of their fatwa. So they brought arguments from Islamic teachings like the concept of maslaha, the best interest or the well-being of children, but they also drew from the Indonesian constitutions, from human rights principles, and from Indonesians' lived reality. Third, they didn't produce fatwas on only issues that concern exclusively women, Because men produce fatwa on everything, right? Can we get a bank loan? Can we donate our organs? Why would women have opinions only on menstruation, on breastfeeding or clothing? No, Kupi said women have opinions and they can and must contribute to all social matters. So the two other fatwas are about domestic violence, which concern everyone, and environmental destruction, which is a very timely topic today. So some of you might still think, but do fatwa really matter? Are they legally binding? Isn't it a waste of time when we had better invest in reforming the laws and policies? But following the Kupi Congress, Kupi's fatwa against child marriage was used as one of the references by the Indonesian government for increasing the minimum age of marriage to 19 years for women. In addition, Indonesian women scholars are now included in arranging the curriculum for national premarital trainings in collaboration with the Ministry of Religious Affairs. And their fatwa against domestic violence has also been taken as a reference for the national draft law on elimination of sexual violence. So in fact, whether it's legally binding or not, it does matter. And we have many other examples in Egypt and in other countries in which we can see that whenever a religious institution is issuing a fatwa, even on topics that women's groups have been working on for years, like FGM, for example, Egyptian NGOs have been working for years on the issues on fighting the practice of FGM in Egypt. But when the Azhar issued a statement on this, then it got international attention. And it was also a reference that could be used by Muslim women groups in other countries. So I will wrap up now because I think my time is over. So when you challenge discriminatory and patriarchal practices by calling upon the Quranic principles of human dignity, of karama, of social justice, it is speaking to our context. It is speaking to what people believe in. So it doesn't feel like something an alienating or an external concept, a foreign concept. So what we want to say here is not let's focus only on religious arguments and forget everything else. No, religious argument is not sufficient alone, but we can't afford ignoring it because this is a space with huge powers and simply because it's a space that matters to us and that matters to the women we work with. So I'm concluding here, but Rozana, it would be great if you could share with us more of the fabulous work done by Sisters in Islam and the example of the guide on family law reform in 2006, because here you were also a pioneer in developing a four-pronged approach to family law reform.
Great. Sarah, thank you so much. That was really an amazing presentation. You know, you really put everything together succinctly and, you know, was well supported as well. The visuals were just amazing. We're getting a lot of comments from that, from the participants. Actually, we are running out of time. It's really very difficult, you know, to put in, you know, such a very important session in 1.5 hours. And I also want to give time for the Q&A session because we've got really very good questions coming in from the audience. So I am actually going to say that, you know, in relation to CIS work, my colleague Shari'ah Sharif will be speaking this Friday. So I'm going to hold on to that question about CIS experience in terms of the guide to equality and get her to take that question when she comes on the session so that we can have time now for the Q&A. I hope you don't mind, Sarah. Yeah?
No, I don't
mind. All right, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have very good questions and my colleagues from Musawah has been clustering them together. So I've kind of like, I see three clusters of questions that I would like to put together and ask them, you know, like one each to each of our speakers. So I will say the questions and then so that everybody knows what they are. And then after that, we'll get the speakers to answer one by one. So I would like to first present the first question to Zahia. So Zahia, this question is for you. It relates to, you know, the interpretation of sacred texts. Please explain how, so it's a cluster of questions, yeah? Please explain how one would interpret, you know, what do you do with, you know, the sacred texts that, you know, are not egalitarian in nature? You know, what are the criteria and what are the selections? And I think one of the core questions, issues that can tie into this is particularly, you know, the issue that you raised with regards to inheritance. So how do we deal with this? Can we change those provisions? How do we reinterpret them? And then the second question, this goes to Ziba, all right? So Ziba, one of the arguments most frequently used to validate male authority is that there is no female prophet, and that also females cannot be imams. And the same argument and reasonings are also used to deprive women in the production of Islamic knowledge. So in conservative Muslim societies, you know, this is very, very difficult to counter. What can we do? How can we respond to this? So can you please shed some light on this? And for Sarah, tying in with that question about, you know, conservative Muslim societies and difficult to counter, you know, how then can we as activists and academics help penetrate areas of civil society that are very resistant to change in long-standing patriarchal norms? How can we work to promote equality in the Sharia for women across all classes? Okay, so we'll start with Zahia first, please.
Okay, for the first question, what is a philosophical and methodological question? How we can, what we can do with the Quranic prescription that show the inequality toward the women. That's I think that this question was the main question of all the modern reformists. They all speak about how we can re-understand, how we can reinterpret the Quran in the light of the new situations, on the light of the new aspiration, the aspiration of the new generations of the aspirations of women. How we can, what must we do to find a solution between what was said in the Quran and the social changes now. We know that that this was, we have many ideas about this. Many we find that there's many attitudes toward this question. We have the conservative attitude that say that we have to take the sacred text as it is said, but we have also another attitude elaborated from, it's the moderate attitude, whose point of view is we have to do a deep reform of the Islamic legal system. And this deep reform will help continuity, will help to find solution between the two attitudes, other attitudes, and preserve peace. And this reform can be is by reopening the gate of ijtihad, by a new and free ijtihad, by a new interpretation of the rulings on the light of maqasid al-Shari'ah, and by using maslaha as a whole legal methodology, and by a new interpretation of Quranic rulings on the light of historical and sociological and anthropological readings. We know that in the classical fiqh there are many differences between the fiqh schools. That means one of the means of these differences that there's no only one readings during history. There are no only one interpretation of the Quran. We can reinterpret the Quran on the light of the new values, like the values of equality, of freedom, of individual freedoms, on the light of gender equality. It's the responsibility of all Muslims to find a solution to have this continuity between what is done with the classical Muslim jurists, but also with what can be done with the new readings and the new interpretations. That's why I think that we have some verses on the Quran what is that is not equal toward women, or like some rules on the inheritance verses. But also we can find in the Quran many other values that is the main part of the Quran. But what is changing Quran is these rules, which are from the customary law, what is proposed to a society that is different from our modern society. What is unchangeable in the Quran is the part concerning the values, the ethics. But what is changeable in the Quran is these historical rules. I think we have to reinterpret the Quran in the light of this, methodology to find a solution to this problem. Concerning inheritance laws,
Zahia,
okay.
Is it possible for me to cut you off there, because we are running out of time? But I think you have definitely given us food for thought in terms of how we need to tackle some of these very difficult questions that are in the Quran, and what you said about being coming forward to reinterpret it in the values that we have today. I think that's a very, very strong message. Thank you so much, Zahia. So I would like to now invite Ziba, if you can please try to respond to the question for you. And I think it can relate to the first one in relation to, what now, about the role of women, and how do we actually deal with this whole notion of only male are the authority when it comes to the question of Islam and the production of knowledge. The floor is yours. If you can please maybe conclude in 3 minutes. Thank you. Tall order, but I have to be tight on this. Thank you.
That is actually the main challenge that we are facing, because the challenge actually, our challenge is not with the Quran. Our challenge is not with the sacred texts, because the essence of Islam is justice. And justice means different things at different times. What we are dealing with, as Sarah so clearly showed us, is patriarchy. This patriarchy is everywhere. And what the patriarchy does is actually indoctrinates us, socializes us into a system of thinking. And we really need to undo that system of thinking. And for instance, when they say, why would there haven't been women prophet? This is an uninformed question, because there have been women prophets. Women also receive revelation. But the fact is that whether they are a messenger is a different matter. Whether they were able to bring a new religion, that is a different matter that we are not going to. And anyway, men are not all of them are prophet. So why they are asking this question? And this is a question, I want to say this question wants to divert us from the real question. And the real question is that why full humanity of women is not accepted? And why women are treated as a second class citizens? And this is the question that we need to answer. And my suggestion is that please don't get ourselves entangled in this kind of diversity questions, because that is meant in order to confuse us, in order to prevent us from dealing with the real question, which is the injustice that is happening in the name of religion. And it depends how we approach the Quran. What is our understanding of the Quran? Is the Quran a book of law? Or is a book of inspiration, guidance, or a book that gives us the way to live and conduct our lives? Law is different. Law is a different matter. And here we are dealing with law. So basically I see that if the people who ask these questions, they have a different approach. And their question is informed by really strong patriarchal assumptions. And these assumptions are hidden, even they themselves, and we are not conscious of it. That is why I said awareness is important, movement is important, and also about our feminist knowledge. We need to create the methodology. We need to create the knowledge and find the strategy. And I want to end by saying that patriarchy was not created. Patriarchal understanding of Islam did not come into existence in matter in one like this. It is a historical construction, and it takes time to undo it. The most important thing that is the process had started. It started long time ago with the rise of equality, feminist voices, egalitarian voices, and we are part of this process. And each of us in our context have our own struggle to deal with. And we need to find our ways. And we need to find our answers for ourselves. I think it is important for us to be first convinced that we are equal human beings. And we have that right and dignity, and then claim it. That's what I have to say.
Great, fantastic. Thank you so much, Ziba. It would be so difficult for me to conclude, but I think, definitely some of the strong messages that's coming in from, this session is the fact that, we have our role to play, as feminists, as activists. We have to also deal with the difficult situations of dealing with power structures, governments, religious authorities, men, and the fact that, knowledge goes a long way. And the fact that, our rights, our reform is actually located within the religion that we believe to, is all about equality and justice. So, yes. In terms of Sarah's question, because we're running out of time, please, engage with Sarah, post the conference. And I'm sure the whole issue in terms of activism will be talked about, throughout the conference when we are in the main sessions as well as the breakout groups. So I'm going to ask Suri now to launch the poll. It's very important for us to know how you're feeling about this session. I know we can go on for another 3 hours on this, but we only have an hour and a half. So yes, the two questions, I think, did you enjoy this webinar? And the next question is, would you like more webinars like this? Tell Musawah what you want, okay? Now, I'm going to draw this to an end. There's a message for the conference participants that you need to sign in to the Zoom meeting, in 10 minutes? Yeah?
That's right.
This is for 10 minutes. All right, great. So once again, thank you so much, Ziba, Zahia, Sarah, for, illuminating us, with your knowledge, and your verve. And we take that spirit with you, to reform, to bring reform to all our lives. It starts small. Don't underestimate the small things. Remember what Zaina said. Sisters in Islam began with 8 women. It is now a global movement. If sis can do it, I'm sure you can too. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.